great for conversation. So good evening and welcome. My name is Nicole Watson. I'm the director of the Catherine D. Murphy Gallery. I'd like to begin by recognizing that St. Catherine University is on the contemporary, traditional, and ancestral homelands of the Dakota people, specifically the Baja Bakuti and the Oceti Chapulin. The Dakota people are still here. They continue to live, love, and thrive on this land. We offer our honor and respect to the Dakota people and to this land that we now occupy. We also understand that acknowledgement is not enough, nor is it justice for the Dakota people. As Joseph M. Pierce, a scholar and citizen of the Cherokee Nation, writes, land is not asking for acknowledgement. It is asking to be returned to itself. It is asking to be heard and cared for and attended to. It is asking to be free. Land is a gift, a relative, a body that sustains other bodies. And if the land is our relative, then we cannot simply acknowledge it as land. We must understand what our responsibilities are to the land as our kin. To engage with the land on the land's terms is an act of reciprocity. Reciprocity rather than recognition is what the land requires because that is what it has already given. Are you not alive, breathing because of this land? Thank you. Okay, just a few small housekeeping things. So you're here for tonight's event, which is a series of monthly events to go along with our current exhibition, Latina and Latinx Minnesota, Reclaiming Space in Times of Change. Two artists in the exhibition, Sam Mendez and Nancy, I don't know, I didn't ask you, is it Ariza or Ariza? Ariza, thank you. We'll be in conversation tonight about social practice and vandalism of art. So our speakers will be talking for about 45 minutes. They'll take some questions for a bit, and then afterwards, I hope you'll stick around and talk to them one-on-one and see their work in the gallery spaces because both of them are very talented artists. So tonight's event is made possible by the St. Catherine University Mission Shares and the Amy Marie Sears Memorial Visiting Artists and Curators Series. These are internal supporters who recognized early on that this exhibition is an expression of the institution's commitment to women-centered, gender-inclusive education rooted in the liberal arts and social justice. The exhibition and all of our events have also been funded in part by a generous grant from the Minnesota Humanities Center with money from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. If you want to help support us in reporting about our outcomes for this exhibition and grant funding, there's a QR code as you enter the gallery spaces where you can share a little bit about your experience. It's a 3-minute survey. I promise you it does not take hardly any time though. And then finally, I want to recognize and thank our brilliant co-curators, Mara Kuyun, who is here tonight, and Billy Franklin, who are our 2024-2025 Amy Marie Sears Memorial Visiting Artists and Curators in Residence, both for their brilliant assembly of the exhibition, but also for the design of all of the programming that's been happening throughout this show this week. That was their work, and we are so lucky to work with them. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to our artists then, who will introduce themselves and take us through tonight's event. So thanks again for coming tonight.
Thank you, Nicole. Welcome, everyone. I'm Nancy Ariza. I'm a visual artist and educator. I'm a participating artist in the exhibition. I'm excited to welcome you to our event tonight and to a conversation about Sam's work, art and artistic practice. So before we get into the conversation, I wanted to thank Samara Kuyun and Billy Franklin for their work as curators, for bringing this opportunity to our community and to organizing all the amazing programming around it. Feel very honored to be part of it. And then I also want to thank Nicole and Lise for all their work on the exhibition and the programming and catalog, and for all your support throughout this and communication too. Yes. So yeah, we'll get into some questions, and we'll have some time for your questions as the audience. And then of course I welcome you to step into the gallery here on the right to see the work in person and have more conversation one-on-one. as more questions and thoughts spark is when we see the work in person. So I'm gonna pass it over to Sam to introduce herself.
I also want to take a moment to thank Nancy for, coming up with such wonderful questions and, being here. Also as a participating artist, Nancy's work is also in the gallery, very close by. So if you're gonna go and check out one, you might as well see both. And why not all 42? But as it says multiple times, I'm Sam Mendez. I was born and raised in the Mission District of San Francisco and actually came to Minnesota in 2019 to start studying at St. Olaf College. I wasn't originally an art major, I was a biology major, and as life happens, you shift. But I've always kind of had a background in art. My grandpa's an artist, my dad's a photographer, and I did a lot of architecture in high school. I graduated from St. Olaf in 2023 with a studio art degree, and then this past spring just completed their Emerging Artist Residency Program, which is their post-bac program that they offer to 3 to 5 students who just graduated and give them exhibition spaces. And now I apprentice under the renowned Glennis, who I'm so thankful that she's here in Northfield, while also working at Forget Me Not Florist as a way to continue with my education in ceramics. There's a lot to learn, and while also doing something creative and floral arrangement for the community. Yeah.
So like I mentioned, we're going to talk about Sam's piece and the story of vandalism behind it. So as you mentioned, you are a recent graduate of St. Olaf, and I'm curious if you could share about what are some of the themes and ideas that you were exploring during your time there and how that led you to creating the work that you intended to create.
Yeah. We have some slides, so we may flip around with them. But this is kind of ties into that question of what I was exploring. In the spring of your senior year as a studio art major, from the month of February to the end of April, you get dedicated class time to work on your senior capstone. It's very open-ended, your professors meet with you, you have an advisor, but it's really, there's no prompt, it's just create your thesis, whatever you want it to be, what you want to present to summarize your art education at St. Olaf. So I went into the spring really, I think all through college, I think a lot about family because I'm not geographically with them. I'm thousands of miles away across the country, and unfortunately I can't get them out of my head as much as I love them. So in the spring of my senior year, I purposefully set it up towards where I was taking intermediate photography, which is the highest level of photography that we have at St. Olaf, as well as my senior studies at the same time to kind of give myself more time to explore photography because I knew that was something that I was really interested in exploring for my senior show. I got really into the concept of cyanotypes, and when thinking about my senior show in general, I was thinking that I wanted to present something that represented who I was as Sam Mendez as a senior in college. And I found myself thinking a lot about the blueprints that I had in my life. It originally started with athletes and celebrities and stuff like that, but I thought, my family worked so hard to help me and give me the resources to go here. How else can I thank them by dedicating a project to them? Because they are the blueprints of my life, and I do believe it takes a village, which is one of the titles, or is the title of my senior show, which is pictured in the top left corner. It is a combination of cyanotype prints on vellum paper to really tie into the idea of blueprints, because historically blueprints were created with cyanotype chemicals architecturally. And I got to mix ceramics in because I thought a lot about my blueprints, where do I spend this time with my family planning my life, what I'm going to do at the dinner table. So that's kind of what I was exploring. I spent a lot of my spring semester really just making an obscene amount of cyanotypes on different materials, anything I could find. I was really obsessed with the idea of illumination, and so I produced many prints on vellum, mulberry paper, different types of cotton strengths to see what I could hold up to the light and get the most out of. So that's kind of what I was exploring at the time. Yeah.
I think when we were first getting to know each other to prepare for this conversation, something that I really appreciated is that we connected on just our histories we were both born in California, but we moved here at different ages, and just like how that impacted us and how it shows up in our work or it doesn't show up in our work, and how family history is a big part of our work as well. So I appreciated getting to know you and your work in that way. I was wondering if you could share a bit about the Van Dyke printing process that you use, and I'm a printmaker, and so I love any process-based medium. And you of course incorporate another process-based medium, which is ceramics. So if you could share a bit more about what the printing process is like for you, and what drew you to that?
Yeah, I think I just love film photography. My dad doesn't understand it, he never will. His go-to is always, there's digital options for this, it's so much easier. But like you said, it's the process behind it. It's the same thing with, like you said, ceramics, the manual labor of your hands creating something and being present for the entire way through. I don't, because of the nature of, producing this as quickly as I did and with as much emotion and kind of the background of the entire situation, I unfortunately didn't take any pictures of the process, but I did include the main part of the process, which was the vandalized positive, which is actually a misprint. Which is why it's a positive. It was supposed to be a negative because I was producing this cyanotype. So why this whole image exists is because it's creating an image of my cousin Sophia and my cat, because I just thought it was a fun image and it reminded me of them and who they are. So Van Dyke brown photochemistry and processing is very similar to cyanotype processing, is in that you are taking a medium, traditionally paper, and coating it in chemicals that are very UV sensitive. So the whole in a nutshell is you take the piece of paper, you coat it in chemicals, you produce a negative. This is a positive, but normally it's a negative. You place it on the paper and then you expose that to UV light for whatever time works best. You really have to experiment, it depends. And with the specific Van Dyke brown chemicals I was using, you then rinse it in a bath of regular water very carefully because it's so fragile, it's paper. When you get it wet, it falls apart. And then you put it again in a fixer, which I was really drawn to because it's similar to darkroom processing, where you have to walk it through this entire time and you watch it appear as it goes on. And after you take it through that fixer, you wash it again one more time, so you have a very soggy, fragile piece of paper. But because I did this in a print shop, actually, I had to carefully hang it up on clothespins and kind of watch it and make sure that the fan wasn't tearing it apart and that the clothespins weren't tearing it apart, which seems really stressful, but for some reason who I am as a person, I enjoy that. It's really nice to be there and watch the image show up in front of you. And especially with cyanotypes and Van Dyke brown, you get to watch it not only show up, but in a different color. And it's never the same. You can make two cyanotypes and expose it to the same amount of light and put it in the same bath, and there's always going to be a slight shift. And so I was drawn to the Van Dyke brown because in the St. Olaf Photo Lab, we have, our dark room, that very traditional educational setting, and the only two chemicals that we had besides regular dark room chemistry is cyanotype and the Van Dyke brown chemistry. And when I was producing this work, I was doing it in the mindset of producing all those other cyanotypes, and all those other cyanotypes for me were all positive. They're celebrations of life, they were celebrations of emotions, and just generally positive. And even though I felt I had the most strength and my best footing in cyanotypes, I thought, I don't want to associate this image with that. I really want to differentiate it, and the best way for me to do that is to just dive in to a completely different chemical system. And also, I think I was really drawn to it because my cousin and my family are all brown. Our skin has this complexion, and I was, the thought of this is brown, just like my skin, just like her skin, really ties into kind of the feelings and emotions I had when this whole incident occurred, and a large part of why I created the piece.
Thank you. You explained that really beautifully. So this piece was vandalized by someone who is like somewhat of a peer, but also in like a supervisory role within the studio space. And so I'm wondering if you could first talk us through the events around that vandalism. Kind of what's the timeline?
Yeah. I am gonna do something that I is a pet peeve. In 2 slides, you will see an obscene amount of text. I am very sorry. It's the only slide with an obscene amount of text. It's for my sake. This happened and it was such a rough moment for me that the dates get mixed up a lot, and it's just for my sake and the respect of the piece and the people involved in this situation. I just wanted to make sure that I had everything as it was. So if you see me reading and you're like, oh my god, she's reading, I am. I'm aware of it. It was intentional. This is actually, before I get to that, this is some of the Van Dyke, this is the process. I forgot I had this slide of that thing. So I'm in the print studio, that's them hanging before I cropped them. And this is me in our wood shop / miscellaneous room where paint and messy things go, exploring spray painting versus painting on that X to highlight it. But that's them hanging fresh, and I think originally there's a total of 11 of them. So that's just the first 5. So there's a lot of context to this situation. This all kind of started in February, as you can see in the timestamp of my Instagram story. This individual is was hired as a photo worker in their sophomore year while I was a senior, and has a history of being a photo worker in the art department, and also works as an assistant in the Flatland Art Museum, which is our version of this, basically, at St. Olaf. And their job is in the photo lab is, to maintain the chemicals, but to also assist students if you have questions. They're in charge of if the drying racks are getting too full, you take them out and you put them in a dedicated space. But the main part is they're handling a lot of student work, and they're trusted to do so. While I was creating cyanotypes for my intermediate photography class, I was super proud that I was able to create my first ever cyanotype, as you can tell by my smiley face on my Instagram story. And it was really important to me because it was something I'd never done. It was cool. It was learning, and it was not only learning, but seeing images of my father, which is what that is. It's my father and his aunt when he was significantly younger than me, and it was an image I hadn't seen before. So it was bringing life to, there was emotions behind this. It is important to know that this person does follow me on social media, or did at the time, and did see this post. They saw that I was proud and posted this. The next day I went to class because I had produced this piece, put it up, took a picture, left it to dry because it was very wet. I went to go and check it to show my father the finished piece, and I noticed that it was suddenly gone. I couldn't find it anywhere. I wasn't accusing anyone. I was just like, hey, if anyone has seen it, let me know. It's this very small community in the photo section at St. Olaf. I kind of put that out there. It's hard for me to ignore that giant can of beans right now. I put that out there, and I had a friend who also works in the TA position at a photo lab reach out to someone they knew had a shift in this gap of time. And they were just like, hey, did you happen to clear out the racks because we're missing a piece of work? They didn't mention my name, they didn't mention anything. It was just, did you happen to clear out the racks? Yeah, I did. I put all of the student work in a pile in this space in the photo lab. Everything can be found there. So I went and searched through that pile and couldn't find anything that I had produced for that class there. It was all missing. Because my morbid curiosity got the best of me, I was searching the entire room, and I had to look at the recycling bin and go, what is a piece of paper? I wonder if it's in the recycling bin. And so I tucked my tail in and started digging through the recycling bin of a classroom and found my print, stuffed at the bottom, covered by other work, and scraps of paper. I had immediately messaged my professor and was just like, I don't know, I don't think maybe it was an accident. I just want to let you know this occurred. My print's fine, I'll make another one, just letting you know it happened, Time passes, this individual, we never really speak, but we're always around each other because I'm in the photo lab, because I'm working on my senior show, and I'm also in a class. Whenever I'm in spaces, they leave, don't really want to be around me, not sure what it is. To this day, I'm not very sure what it is. But that's kind of like the beginning context before this giant event. This is the slide I had mentioned. I thought it was really important that, you visually see that this all happened within the span of 7 days. It starts on a Sunday and ends on a Sunday. It all happened so quickly. When I look back at it now, I can't believe that it happened in such a quick span of time. So in March, on a Sunday, I'm in the inkjet printer room, which is a very gate-kept room in this art community because inkjet printers, as we all know, are very expensive. And not only that, they're very fussy. They are prone to breaking and enters, unfortunately. So the key to this room is locked in a drawer, or not locked, but it's in a drawer that only photo lab workers and seniors and emerging artists with explicit permission are allowed to use. And in order to go to this room, you have to take the key, exit the photo lab, walk down the hall, enter another room that is mostly locked, go into that room, and unlock the door to get into the room. It's a whole process. So on Sunday, I'm in that room with permission from faculty and directly my professor because I'm producing those negatives that I need to make cyanotypes for a project that is due on Monday. I'm in there, I'm trying to rush because I'm clearly procrastinating if my things are due on Monday. And I realized, dang it, I printed this wrong. I forgot to invert it. It's a positive. I'm going to put it on the side and grab it when I'm gone. Or, I just don't think about it, I move on. I leave forgetting it, and not realizing I forgot it. On Monday, critiques are happening in both the introductory and intermediate photography classes, and no one is supposed to technically be allowed in that room. The alleged vandal, who I refer to as AV just for shortening stuff, is not seen during their TA shift. The understanding is that TAs are present for all critiques because you're supposed to be there supporting students and providing input and knowledge. On Tuesday, my print is found still in the room in the evening by a peer who was also working in the room with explicit permission. They messaged me immediately. The exact question was, did you do this? I don't think you did this, but I just want to make sure. And clearly my answer is no. And I emailed my professors promptly, included photos of the piece and just all the information that's available before. Also acknowledging that, I'm a little worried because my piece was thrown in the trash earlier in the semester. And this individual is kind of just ramping up behavior. Wednesday through Thursday, I'm in and out of meetings with professors, department chairs, class deans, and the Department of Public Safety. A mandatory meeting is called for all photo workers, which I'm not a part of, but all photo workers and classes meet and the situation is addressed as unacceptable, not okay. We're gonna get to the bottom of this, we just want to, this is not okay. Thursday, after all of these meetings, Wednesdays, Thursdays, I'm still going to classes. I'm a senior, I'm preparing for life. I'm doing a bunch of things, talking to my family as I'm kind of trying to figure out how I feel about this entire situation. I just saw crosshairs and an X etched across my family member's head. The one thing going in my head is I no longer feel safe in this space. And that's what these meetings are with all of these professors, department chairs, class deans. I have an idea of who did this. I don't feel safe. I don't think it's okay that they are allowed to handle student work so openly if they not have only have thrown away my art, but physically damaged it in such a violent manner. after all of these meetings, I am coming to the conclusion that the school is not doing anything about it. I have been told by not only department chairs, but deans, and ultimately the Department of Public Safety, you know, because there's no cameras in this building and we don't have an image of this person physically doing this to your piece, even though, you know, all of the evidence makes sense and what you're saying lines up, we legally cannot do anything because we don't want to open ourselves to risks, which I understand. But also nothing is done. And in these conversations, they ask me, you know, what do you want? What do you want out of this? And all I say is, you know, I just don't want the student to have such open access to student work anymore. I think they have proven through their behaviors that they can't be trusted to keep student work safe. And they essentially go, you know, I agree with you, but we cannot fire this individual. We can't do anything because we can't prove physically that they were the individual who did this. I'm sorry, but that's what it is. So I'm kind of like, okay, that's it, I guess. And I kind of find myself really sitting there struggling. You know, this isn't okay. I know that that's the reality of the situation, but it's not okay deep down in my soul. Not only for the sake of me, but for the sake of anybody else that looks like me or my cousin. So I speak to my support system that I'm very thankful for, and even go out of my way to ask a professor, is this okay? In confidence, is it okay if I do this? And he goes, Sam, the walls in this building are designed for you to install work. If anyone tells you you can't install work, that's not okay. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna create a piece. So I start making this piece at night with the intention of nobody else being around, because I don't want anybody else to see what I'm doing. I really want this to be a surprise to the department. I purposefully install the piece directly across from the photo lab in front of the windows that you can see from inside. So when you walk into the photo lab and you look to your left, it's the first thing you see if you haven't seen it on your walk into the photo lab. And I do so because I know that the alleged vandal works the next morning at 8 a.m. And they haven't admitted to it, and everybody's making me feel like, you know, I'm making this up, you know, because I didn't physically see them do this, they didn't do it, it's not what happened. So I go, you know, if somebody who didn't do it sees this and has a reaction, that's a little incriminating, is it not? So I put it up, and the person clocks into their shift, and they look to the left and they see it, they gasp, and they rush out of the room. Mm-hmm. They don't even show up to the rest of their shift. Mm-hmm. They just leave and never return. You know, this happens, I am open, my friends are checking in with me, they're like, wow, what is this? You know, when I originally put up the piece, which I have the original that I had put up, I signed it Sam Mendez in collaboration with, and left a blank.
Nice.
This person later stared at that for a very long period of time, but I was really hoping they would pencil their name in. I didn't think they would, but I was really hoping. All of this happens, people start putting together the dots. I get a lot of messages saying, you know, this person has also done horrible things to me. This person has also, you know, made comments about my work. This person I've watched them handle my work unprofessionally, and it's brought me to worry, you know, but I let it go because I thought I was just seeing things. So although there wasn't school educational repercussions to their actions, there were a lot of societal repercussions because St. Olaf is such a small department. Especially the art department. I mean, my year there's 17 art majors in our graduating class. So everyone knows each other and word goes around. This person is panicking, and, you know, still need to work on my senior show. So unfortunately, I still need to be in these spaces, and so does this individual. On Sunday, a week after all of this happened, I am working throughout the building on my senior show because a deadline is approaching. So I'm a bee running around on this floor. The photo lab doesn't open until noon, and the photo worker who is scheduled for that shift is actually my housemate and a very close friend. The photo worker opens the lab at noon, and as she's setting up, the space for students to come in and work, she witnesses this alleged vandal let themselves in, go to that little drawer, take the key, walk out, go to the printer room, and stay in there for an hour. The person doesn't realize that they were seen. They then return, put the key back, and does a lap around the building. And I've noticed this because when I see them, I know who they are. And I'm running around the building doing stuff. I finally enter the photo lab at 2:30 to start printing my cyanotypes for my senior show. Coincidentally, this vandal enters the room from the opposite entrance at the exact same time. They ask the photo worker for access to the printer room because now they're following the rules because everything is heightened. People are paying attention now. You can't just grab that key without being questioned. They ask for access to the printer room, stating that they forgot pieces in there from a previous night, and they need to go in to retrieve said pieces. The photo worker lets them in. I'm just working. I'm ignoring everything because I'm not supposed to be speaking to this person. I'm just working. Photo worker comes to me and is like, "Hey, how was your work destroyed?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I'll tell you. We're friends. This is how I found it. This is what happened. It happened in that room, this and that. Okay. I have something to tell you that I'm a little suspicious about." Okay. What is it? The person you believe destroyed your art just went into that room and is claiming that somebody destroyed their art. They are claiming that somebody shredded their pieces of paper and their images in that room, but I saw them go in there an hour ago. They have access to get to that key because their key card lets them in because they're a photo worker. No one else has been here. I'm just letting you know. I just let them in and I saw it and I walked away and came to talk to you. Okay, what are the images? Just by chance. Maybe I'm worried because I'm like, maybe I was wrong. Maybe I just socially ruined somebody's, feelings and sense of community. I'm really stressed because I'm afraid that they also are a victim of something else and somebody else is wreaking havoc on this campus. Oh, their pieces in that room are actually their final from last year that they've already documented. And, I don't know what it is, but I'll just wait. I'll play it out. The alleged vandal comes back into the photo lab in tears, making it a point to walk past me sobbing. Telling the photo worker, somebody has destroyed my art. Somebody has destroyed my art. I don't know what to do. This isn't okay, Sobbing, making a scene. The photo worker goes, let's go look it out. Let's go check it out. Let's see what's going on. Oh, I'm noticing that these are your finals that you posted on your Instagram a year ago. Why are they even in this room? There's not a camera in this room. It's literally just 2 inkjet printers, a table, and a trash can. Why were they in here? Well, I was just documenting them. I really needed to document them, but they were on your Instagram already. And there's no camera in here. There is a dedicated documenting room. Why didn't you go in there? Oh, I didn't think about that, but I can't believe somebody has torn apart my pieces. And I think they're targeting Sam and I. Making a scene. And making it a point towards where I can hear it. And the photo worker, my friend, my housemate goes, I think you should email the correct people, and if you really want to get to the bottom of this, maybe you should connect with Sam to see if there's similarities in this, talk and compare, but you should talk to professors and send this out. The person looks past me and smiles and walks out the room. no longer crying, not a single tear. And I'm kind of just like, wow, the audacity, while I'm standing right here. And the person you cried wolf to is someone I literally share a wall with, you know? And they then go on social media and make this giant thing. And they also take my words. When I posted on social media originally and shared this piece, I made it a point to say, I don't feel comfortable sharing this for the sake of my family and my cousin's sanity, and how I would feel if I was her and this suddenly happened and it's an image of me. And so this person goes on to social media and goes, for the sake of myself and my family, I will not be sharing what happened to my art. But this needs to stop, and someone is causing huge amounts of pain in this department. Nothing else is said. They don't reach out to professors. They never sent the email. I tell professors of this incident and they go, we didn't hear anything. You know, what are you talking, because I email them as soon as that person walks up. And more conversations happen with deans, chairs of departments, because I'm like, they are now egging me on more. This is blatantly, they're making this up. They're making it a point to destroy their own art to redeem their sense of community. I don't know what to do. But I don't think there's gonna be a resolution here, so ultimately a no contact order is placed. And me and this individual are no longer allowed to ever speak to each other, and if we do, there are consequences, such as possible suspension, or no longer having access to studio spaces. And the big question for me comes, well, I'm working on my senior show. If it's the situation is a first come first serve and they're purposefully hanging out in that room so I can't get in there, what am I supposed to do? And they were like, we can't do anything, you know? The only thing we can do is start making contracts where Sam is allowed in this space from X to Y. The other individual is allowed in this space from X to Y, you know? And I'm like, that's not worth it, I'll just deal with it, you know? After all of this, the rest of my senior year, this person spends their time hanging out outside the senior studio. Just standing there, sitting there, intimidating me. They're a sophomore, they have no need to be near that studio. And that's kind of like the timeline. That's a long timeline, sorry. But that's kind of the full context behind that situation, yeah.
But I feel it's super helpful, and I feel like you gave us the case file
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
walked us
Yeah.
through it, and I am truly shocked that this all happened within a week.
Yeah.
And I think it just highlights how personal our art is to ours, and not only if it includes our family, but just the process of it. And when you hurt our art, you're hurting us, right?
Yeah.
As individuals. Yeah, thank you, and thank you for your vulnerability
Oh,
and
yeah.
sharing that. You touched on this a little bit, but I'm wondering if you can share a bit about at what point did you decide to incorporate the vandalism into the conceptual framework of the artwork, and like what were you hoping that the public would get from it? What message were you hoping that they would get from it?
I think for me, this is the image of what happened. That's what they did to my piece. I think the concept of including that vandalism directly in the piece kind of came naturally, instinctually. You know, they etched an X across my cousin's forehead.
Mm-hmm.
They also I don't know if you can pick it up because of the glare, but they also made it a point to square out my cousin as a subject.
Mm-hmm.
And there's multiple slashes across her face, and thankfully not my cat's because he's just there. But you know, there's multiple. It's not, I accidentally scraped something about it. It's clearly they were upset. There was a lot of violence behind these actions. And for me in making this piece, I was like, you know, it is my piece. It's not so much as me being artistic or making, manipulating something. I just want to present it as it was presented to me. I want to, the only highlighting I did is of that center X across her face, with the red because it was the most prominent to me. And it was important to me because, you know, when I found this, all I could think is that they hoped that I saw this and stopped being in those spaces. Felt so afraid that I couldn't go to the community that I once belonged in. They did this with a point of exclusion, and probably with the thought that I would be so afraid I wouldn't show it to anyone. You know, it's a pretty violent thing. So for me, I wanted to be, you know what, no. I had to look at this, and you thought I wasn't gonna do anything about it, I'm gonna be loud. I'm going to be as destructive as you were. I'm going to make it a point where everybody sees what you did to not only me, but to my cousin and my family. And it's not gonna be something that's swept under the rug. And after the lack of response from the school, and you know, this kind of tiptoeing around the fact of we can't really fire someone, you know, because of this and that, I'm like, would it be any different if my skin tone wasn't brown? Would your response to this be different if I wasn't a woman of color in at a primarily white institute? So highlighting kind of the vandalism and just keeping it as it is and installing it in the way I did originally at the college was a way of kind of not only kicking back at the person who did it, but also kicking back at the response from an institution. Kicking back at the idea of, you know, this happened, but let's not talk about it. You know, this isn't bringing great. It was literally said to me, we have to deal with this situation now because people in the biology department are speaking to me. They should be, you know, but okay, since you want to keep it under the rug, I need you to realize that this happens regardless of if I presented it to you or not. Things like this happen on campuses across the US. And unfortunately, because of how these institutions in society are structured, a lot of the time, victims don't feel as though they can say anything because they don't want to then feel the repercussions. You know, you don't want, if this happens to you, I didn't want to say anything. When I saw it, I wanted to go and cry. I wanted to fly home. I wanted to just not deal with the rest of the situation. But I just felt like everybody else needed to see what it was as it was and just highlight the part that icked me, for lack of better words, the most. And the point of the mirror there also was to give somebody the opportunity to see themselves in this piece and in the place of my cousin. Also for context, the reason why her head is etched out, like her face, I've never really shared the original images next to this, besides in those spaces on campus, which is why I didn't share it on social media, was for her, I always struggle with this word, but for her to be anonymous. And, you know, to also remove the idea of like a specific individual. It's, you know, this could be anyone of any background, you know? And I wanted people to like sit there and be like, what if this was me? What if I was the one who had an X etched across my face? Yeah.
I was thinking back to our conversation in preparation for this, and I think you had mentioned to me that the alleged vandal is of similar ethnic background to you.
Yeah.
And so that, I feel like that adds another level of complexity to this. And it made me think of, if any of you follow like the national art news, back in July, there was an artist named Sajia Sikander who had work at the University of Houston campus, had a bronze sculpture as a piece of public art of a woman, and the woman had braided hair on either side, and a crinoline that had calligraphy, and she was wearing a lace collar that was referencing Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And so there was a lot of protest around this work because people thought that the braids on the side of her head looked like horns. So they were protesting that it was a satanic sculpture in a public space. And so it actually ended up being decapitated. And the artist had the opportunity to fix the sculpture. And I want to read you a quick quote that was, so the sculpture, in this way, the sculpture will serve as a quote, a testament to the hatred and division that permeate in our society, end quote. So this is kind of demonstrating the reality of the division that we are experiencing in our society right now. And I think about your experience where it's like this kind of lateral violence within our communities, right? That when we are hurt by our own people, that hurts even more, that impacts us even more than when we are hurt by others. And as we are just 2 days out from the presidential election, we know that the Latino vote had a big impact in the results. I feel like this is the prime time to be having this conversation.
I do, when I reflect on this and when I was making this piece and when I look at it now, and I think about the response from just everyone, you know, I unfortunately have the thought of, would this have been different if the person who did it did not have the same background as me? You know, for me, when I look at this and like the etches directly across her forehead, the first thing in my mind went, am I being hate crimed? Am not, you know, it's like that is really intense. That is such an act of aggression. There's so much intention behind putting an X across someone's forehead. And, you know, and then when I put two and two together and realized that that person had a similar background to me, all I could think of is why. You know, like why would you do this to me? There's only 5 of us on this campus that share this background, quite literally, and you're choosing me, you know? And, you know, in light of the election, that's a similar sentiment, I feel like, around amongst the Latina community. Is like, why would you do that?
Yes.
It's the frustration of, you know, it's one thing for the demographic that you kind of expected to go in that direction, it's another when it's your own.
Absolutely.
You know? Yeah.
I wonder if you can share a bit about the title of the piece and how you came up with that.
So, as I had mentioned, I did this kind of with angst and the intention of the person seeing it and having a reaction. And, you know, I left it for them to sign if they had really wanted to. And the epitome of that to me is bite me. You know, you want to take this jab? Look at what I'm gonna do. You're gonna hope that I'm silent about it. Everyone is gonna hear now. You know, and it was kind of, you know, an invitation. They took it, unfortunately, and destroyed their own work. But which is not what I thought they were going to do. It was like the exact opposite reaction I thought they were going to do. And you know, that shifted to Muérdeme because it felt fitting for this show, you know, for it to be in the language that I was first taught. And you know, it's also, for me, feels as an even more direct way to communicate to this person with a similar background as me and with that language. And Muérdeme was like the direct translation that I could find. I don't, in my experience, don't think it's necessarily used in the same way in Spanish. But it also speaks to that duality of, you know, that this shared experience of like mixing languages and communicating. But for me, it was like, you know, I know you understand this as well. Like, I know this person really, if you didn't get it the first time, you'll get it the second time. It was me really just being cheeky. I looked at it and kind of laughed. I was like, this is fun. This is funny. I don't know.
I really appreciate how it's, you know, whereas everyone else's title is in the object label, this one's like right above the work, and because it is essential to understanding the piece. Something I thought that was really interesting is that some of your professors in the art department invited you to come into the classroom and share about your work and brought the classes to the work when it was up. Can you share about like what were some of the responses that you heard from classmates?
Yeah, I am very appreciative that I did have professors who, you know, it was kind of the elephant in the room. It was just in the hallway, a very public space, and students are buzzing about it. So I was very appreciative that not only professors in the department were keeping their ear to students and what they were talking about, what's going on, but also thought to reach out to me first. And, you know, because they could have just gone and taken their classes there and not invited me. They could have just been, what do you think about this? Let's have a discussion. But they did a very intentional thing of being like, hey Sam, you know, I know you're free during this period. Do you want to come down into my class and talk? Do you want to present this to everybody else and, you know, say your piece? Because there was an artist statement that kind of summarized it on a piece of paper next to it. And they could have just read that, but they made it a point to invite me and show the human kind of behind this. And a lot of the professors were they were like, you know, I'm glad that you put this up in this space. I'm glad that you're highlighting that this space isn't, you know, we call St. Olaf a bubble on the hill a lot of the time because it's such a small place away from the rest. It's in Northfield, it's very rural. And they said you popped that bubble in a very good way. You proved that this place isn't as, unfortunately, safe as everybody pretends that it is. And they also gave me the practice of speaking with my art and, you know, kind of processing this all through because it happened, again, so quickly. And a lot of the responses I got from peers, I feel like if I take every 10, 8 of them were, I never thought this would happen here. That was the sentiment pretty much every time we had a conversation. And it was a lot of just shock and, you know, there's people who are like, you know, Sam, I don't know you. I have had a class with you or I see you in passing. I still just can't believe that this happened to someone that I know, even in that regards, and that the perpetrator of this is also somebody that we know who's in such a tight-knit community. And ironically, one of the classes that were taken down where I wasn't present because I had a class to go to myself, the vandalizer was in, the vandal, and they cried wolf again. And they actually said, I can't believe somebody would do this to a class. Yeah, that was the majority of it. I just feel like a lot of it was like, I can't believe this happened, you know? Yeah, and then a lot of like, how did you do this, by the way? You know, what is Van Dyke Brown, you know?
Yeah.
It's an art community, but, yeah.
How did this event change the way that you look at your artist practice and the work and the impact that your work can have?
Yeah, I think I struggle a lot with describing my artistic practice. You know, even though that's a question you get posed as an artist multiple times in your life, it's like, you know, how do you come up with your ideas for your pieces? And I have always struggled with that because my brain is just like, oh, I really want to make this thing, I'm just gonna make it. I'm really into bowls right now. I'm gonna throw 20 bowls in a row. It's not really, you know, my goal with these bowls is to then make a bigger bowl or anything. It's just, I get so tied into learning how to do a process of something that I learn things along the way. And that is kind of how my pieces are made. Like, my family, my senior show just started with, I don't know how cyanotypes work, and I know that they're tied to architecture. Let's explore that. Let's figure that out. And so with this, it was like, I saw it and I didn't know what I was gonna do, and I was just like, I'm feeling a lot of emotions. And I'm allowed to feel those emotions as I'm learning this thing. And it kind of made me become more mindful as I'm learning things. It made me realize, oh, what emotion can I convey through this new practice? Like the way that my hands are moving and the way that I'm interacting with these materials, what does that remind me of? Is kind of what started to happen as I produced this piece and after I produced this piece, I think. Yeah.
So the last question is, so my background is in teaching in higher ed, and actually I've noticed that vandalism is something that does happen, and sometimes unintentional damage of student work is something that occurs. And what I've observed is that a lot of faculty and staff are just really reactive and not really sure how to handle something like that. So I'm wondering if you have any advice for faculty and staff, and so that they can be more proactive. And on the other side of that, what advice do you have for a student that has gone through something like this? How could they advocate for themselves?
Yeah, I think one of my frustrations, as we had spoken about through this, is that there was so much reactionary of like a lot of these email exchanges and in-person exchanges where, I'm sorry, Sam, I've never experienced this before. I'm sorry, Sam, that this hasn't happened on this campus, which is valid, but also not something that's necessarily helpful to somebody in that situation. It's like, yeah, I know it, this has never happened to me too. Like that, it's kind of, you don't need to acknowledge that. And I understand why people do, but after a certain point in every conversation where that's the starter, it just gets really difficult to hear. And it's, you know, it's hard for me to give advice to a professor because I don't know what that experience is like. I've only experienced education as a student. So I can't speak to an experience that I don't know about, but what I can suggest is just imagine how it would feel if you were the student you're speaking to. That's just speak to them. And as professional as a way if you can, but as like a human, just talk to them with emotion, be aware, give them the spaces and resources that they need. And then on the other end of that, kind of ironically, if you're a student and this happens to you and you're kind of struggling to navigate how you want to react and advocate for yourself, you know, just, I think it's hard because you can, in this situation, the only person who can really advocate for you, unfortunately, is yourself. And that's so difficult to do when you feel so hurt and attacked and everything. And, you know, if you're a student going through this, it's okay to be upset by what faculty are telling you. It's okay to be mad and angry. I feel like so often, especially for students of color, as soon as you start to express any amount of emotion that isn't positive, you start to get dismissed a little. You start to get pressed into that, well, they're just angry, that's not how they feel, you know, you just have to give them time. But in these situations, it's very human to be upset, like, and it's upsetting that, you know, you're expected to be professional when you are the victim in this situation. You shouldn't be the one coaching your faculty in how to best support you. You know, you should be able to speak up for yourself. And in a situation like mine where you find out that your school isn't going to do anything, be loud. Because at that point, all you have is yourself. All you have is your voice. If the systems that are set to support you aren't supporting you, don't be afraid to be loud, because there are going to be people who are thankful that you're doing that. There's going to be people who, unfortunately, were silenced, who are going to see what you're doing, and even if you're struggling, it may help somebody else in the long run, I feel like. And you'll find support from other people. That was something for me when I didn't want to say anything publicly, and when I did, and I had that influx of, you know, this, you're not alone, like, this happened to me, or I have similar situations with this person and this and that, it made me feel so much better about advocating for myself, because I was like, I wasn't crazy. I wasn't kind of, you know, not that anyone was intentionally gaslighting me, but they were kind of downplaying the situation, you know, and it's not a situation that deserved to be downplayed.
Yeah, I appreciate the reminder to take a human-centered approach.
And also, like, take time for yourself. Like, I feel like also with this election and just things with a lot of emotion, there's this expectation, I don't know if it's because of social media or anything, to just, you know, pick yourself up and go again and keep fighting. I think it's important to note that when this happened, I kind of just, like, locked myself in my room for, like, a little bit of time. Like, I didn't want to speak to anyone besides my father, you know? It's okay to have that moment and take care of yourself while also advocating for yourself.
Give yourself the space to process.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you, Sam. So, anyone has any questions?
Did you tell your cousin, and did she have a reaction?
expected a reaction from her.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually, so when I submitted this, I didn't think this piece was gonna go anywhere. That's why I posted like the artist statement on my Instagram, but I didn't post any images of it. And I also told people like you can share it if you want, but I would prefer if you asked me. Because when this, I mean, she's 16 now, so when this happened, she was like 15, 14 years old. I was talking to my dad and eventually spoke to her parents, my aunt and uncle, about it. And, you know, I was like, I know this is like, I'm dealing with this, but you should know because it's an image of your daughter. And I can't imagine how that feels for you, let alone if she finds out somehow. So that was like why I removed her face and didn't put it on social media at all. When I was applying to this, I did sit down with the parents without her and had a conversation of, you know, I'm thinking about sending this into something. I won't do it if you don't feel comfortable doing that because you're her parents. And I don't want to break that. I don't feel like I'm in a position to go to her directly. I feel like this is, you guys should deal with this, you know. Not deal with it, but handle it in the best way. And their response was like, no, Sam, this is a very powerful response and we're proud that you made this. And you were thankful that you thought of us before even reaching out to us and took out her face, you know. And as long as someone looks at that who knows her and can't identify it as her, we're okay, you know? And so I applied to this a while ago. Time passed, she's gotten older, she's now a junior in high school, or a sophomore, she's somewhere there. And I gave the approval, and I came to realize this is going to be posted on social media eventually, and she's probably going to see it if she even, you know, if she doesn't see it on social media. She's a teenager. I would Google my family members' names, you know. She's going to find it somehow. So I had a conversation with them again, and they were like, you know, she is older now, and she has her own social media presence, and she's, you know, growing up. You can talk to her if you want. Coincidentally, I didn't get the chance to talk to her because my dad showed her in passing.
Nice.
Before I got there was the day I was going to call her. I was like, are you free later today? Can I have a conversation with you? Yeah. Talking to my dad in passing. Oh, I brought up your piece to Sophia today. Okay. Did you show it to her? Yeah, I put it in her face. I told her about it. You know, dude, he's not intentionally to be mean. Just, you know, hey, look, you're on the internet. So I am freaking out because I'm like, oh, but if this was me, I would, you know, as a 16-year-old Sam, I was not equipped for any of this. And so I'm like, you know, Dad, I wish you didn't do that, but you did it. How did she react? She kind of just laughed at it. She was like, what am I looking at? That's me. Why is there an X on my face? But it wasn't anything horrific, you know? And my dad was like, oh, this is Sam's art piece, you know, it's in a show, this and that. She was like, oh, that's cool. Can I drive the car? That was kind of the reaction. And so I called her after and I was like, hey, I'm sorry, I'm really sorry you had to find out through my dad. Are you okay? Are we like? Is everything okay? Like, if you need anything, I'm here. I can do my best to change things if you really don't want this. But like, are you okay? I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I really don't care, Sam. You know, she's just like, no, it's fine. My face, it's okay. Even if my face is in it, I don't know these people. I don't know what happened. And she was a really good sport about it. She was more just like, you could have chosen a different photo. And I was like, that's not. You know, yeah, that was that. She was a really good sport about it, and I'm very thankful for that. Yeah.
Other questions, comments?
So I have a reaction to it, but I want to find out more. It seems to me that you wouldn't have done this on your own, right?
No.
And so, but you took it upon yourselves to put it out there as this is what was done to me. And I think that's very courageous and very powerful as an image. I also find like you said, you know, this happens probably thousands of times that we don't hear about it.
Mm-hmm.
How would you take your example to empower other people to take control of their images and be able to respond? I mean, I'm just amazed by your ability to speak so clearly about it, because I don't know that I could be so calm and collected and rational if that happens to me. So.
I thank you for saying such nice things. It was really difficult for me. I mean, on the way here, I was talking to Theo about this, and I was like, how am I supposed to speak about this? Like, I was really scrambling to find the right words when it happened, and you know, I'm thankful that I was brought into classes to speak about it. I was like, I don't really want to talk about this to my peers right now. I'm going to do it in the hopes that it helps someone and that it brings light for, you know, just like, my big thing is just at navigating primarily white spaces as a woman of color and just somebody who doesn't fit that physical description, as hard as it is. And I feel as though we don't really have communications about that, or like conversations about that, really. We all kind of just like, every now and then you have a conversation of like, did you hear what he just said? And then you text your friend who was there and you're like, you know, but there's never really like, we kind of just move on with things, like with microaggressions, and not even with stuff that's aggressive, just like people will say something off to you, and in my experience I've been taught, you know, just moving past it is significantly better than confronting someone about it, because they're likely not going to realize what happened. And also it shouldn't be my duty to teach somebody that what they did was wrong. And I don't know, it's hard for me. I know that I did this with the intention of, like, you know, shedding light and helping, like you said, other people, the people who don't feel like they can say something. But a part of me is always kind of just like, what is this really doing? You know, like, it's just an image, and I struggle with that internally a lot. Of, you know, I made this, but it's not the same as directly helping someone necessarily. Like, I unfortunately, it's a weird thing. And I think the image helps because I mean, even now it's hard for me to look at it for a long period of time. But I think that's a good thing. Because it shouldn't be something that exists, in my opinion, you know, such hateful images like this shouldn't exist. And I think a lot about the history of photography in general. The idea of who can capture an image of somebody has so much, there's so many complex layers to that, all the way to like, the original chemistry behind film stocks wasn't made to capture any skin tone besides white. Like, that's not really an answer. There's just so many thoughts there that I'm like, I don't.
But no, I think you answered me in a way that helps me see this also in a context of a wider context of photography and documentation of what is happening in the world.
And the motivation to help others. That's going to give you strength.
The reason this is styled like this, and there's a significant difference between how it's installed at the college and how it's installed here at the show. And at the college, I went into this and I was like, I want to blow this image up. I want to make it poster size. I want to make it that 24 by 36 size, because I was thinking of, like, you know, when I'm at home, there's a lot of construction going on. Wheat paste is such a prominent thing, and it's such a prominent thing in social justice and social actions. You're walking through the Mission and there's a construction project, you're gonna see something that's kind of hard to look at because people are making political statements. So when I had made this originally, that's kind of what I had going in mind. It's like, man, I really wish that I could blow this up, but I can't without, one, spending way more time than I really want to at this moment and can physically and emotionally take at this moment. Because I wanted to incorporate that physical positive that was destroyed, and it is literally this big. Like it is so small. I pulled out those to make the scans for this and I was like, wow, that is really tiny. What was I doing with this, you know?
So, Sam, are these 8
yeah.
by 10 and these 36 by 24?
I don't think they're even 8 by 10s. They're like a really odd, they're a little bit smaller.
And then these are the size you like.
Yeah, they're the 24 by 36 that I had wanted these to be at. Yeah.
Sam, is there a significance to 11?
No, it was, I kind of, when I was making it, I was like, no, I'm gonna look at this, I'm just gonna whip out as many as I physically can. Also to compensate for the fact that I can't make it as big as I wanted it to be. And then it became 11 because is it even? There was a point in making like the piece in the middle with the mirror directly in the middle and having the same amount on the other side, so having 5.
Yeah.
And just, you know, just conceptually looking at it like that. But in terms of the number 11, I don't really have a connection. Yeah.
That's gonna just reflect. I just wanted to say just one thank you for sharing your sacred story.
Yeah.
And also I think for me, I'm being grounded in kind of like you said, these 2 days after the election and all of these changes in our country. I'm feeling really grounded. I just hear this piece of like the only person I wanted to talk to was my dad, and I'm just like holding that piece for me and that resiliency. And I'm just thinking about, you know, you told your story in so many places and spaces, and it wasn't heard or wasn't responded to. But I'm just grounded in this like resiliency of like, how can we have more of those dads in the world? How can we have more of those aunties and uncles that you could go to and say, I'm thinking about this art project. Like, I'm just hearing this piece of like, yeah, I did this and it was really hard and painful, but also I did have people who did hear my story, who were listening, who could honor and, you know, see me in my light and my justice and my truth. And so I was just kind of thinking like, you know, what are your ideas about how can we be more of those uncles and aunties and dads in the world, you know, when, for others, because like you said, that's happened so many times, so many places. How can we be more of those people for the people in our lives, you know? Yeah.
I think a lot about like, you know, like when somebody comes up to you, how you react to that is such a big impact on if they decide to speak to you more about that, you know, and if they feel safe communicating to you more. And for my support system and stuff, it was like, wow, this is serious, let's sit down. Something big happened, let's address this and not just move on to the next thing. And that's kind of similar to how I feel about the election. There's a lot of like, well, this was expected. What did we expect, you know? We just gotta, and it's like, no, we're allowed to feel this pain. It's you know, it's completely normal that you hoped for a different outcome. It's also okay that you're saddened by that and you are grieving that didn't happen, you know? And I don't know, for me, I think for my dad, a big thing was just like, wow, let's, you know, I'm gonna move away from what I'm doing and speak to you. It's dedicating time and being human, you know, like after the election results came in, I like many other people had to go to work the next day, even though I didn't want to. And what really helped me was that when I went into work, it wasn't this, we're working, we're not gonna talk about anything. It was something big happened and we are allowed to be sad. We are allowed to hug each other and cry about what just happened. I don't know if you have different thoughts or.
No, I agree with you. I think just creating that space for us to feel what we need to feel.
I'm thinking about, Sam, like there's like a performative aspect to your work, right? That moves it from something that's very internal and personal to something that's very external. And like I'm, as someone who works with students going into senior show, like that's the class that I teach here, and like knowing how stressful that time is, like on its own. I'm looking at Monica because she also teaches, she's taught that class with me and works with students who are and working the fall semester before making the work, which is also a very stressful time. And so like having to participate in this and respond to this in that, like, that to me is kind of mind blowing. But like just trusting your gut and just like doing and being like, I'm just gonna put it out there and see what happens. Feels very like there's like a performative in a good way, I think, that I hope was a little bit cathartic. But then I'm thinking too about like you sort of reclaimed the image in service for yourself and others. And so when I think about like the title of our exhibition and this idea of reclaiming space, right? Like the putting it on the wall and holding space for it in this really, to me, in a way that feels very sacred between the lighting and just like how much care you took with like the red frames and the layout on the wall that we had wrong, that you told us when you got here at the opening, we quick changed it when you got here, right? Like those things matter. So the amount of intentionality you were able to give it with a little bit of distance, right, between you and the experience. I don't know, I love that connection between this show, and I'm just so honored that we get to have it here. So I don't really have a question, but just like the amount of energy and bravery that took, but also I'm glad you had this opportunity to present it here, because I do think it helps people. I do think it, like marking that space, making room for that story, like that's the point.
I am very thankful that, like the curatorial team, you guys, chose to accept it. And it's also, it's such an honor to be around other, like such powerful pieces in this show. It's like everything is so intentional and there's so much meaning behind everything. I also just want to highlight everybody else. It's insane. I don't know, in a good way.
Yeah, in a really good way.
Yes.
I just have one question. You were talking about sizes.
Yeah.
And I thought, because when you think about it, like everything that's bigger gets more attention. So it's easier to, oh, look, you damaged this size of my art, right? And then just say, well, but it was just a picture and it was small. And I thought I think it's extremely brave that it doesn't matter what it was. It doesn't matter the size. If it was big or small, it's your art, it was your piece, and someone messed up with it. You know what I mean? So that's the courage, that's the braveness of, you own your own piece and said, this is it. It could be, a little 2x2. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, you know what I mean? It is your art.
Yeah.
And that is amazing, because, and then you're able to, expand the damage, look, this is my art no matter what I do with it, right? So that's really cool.
Yeah.
It's such a small furtive action, this vandalism. It's sort of, gonna do this quiet furtive little thing to hurt this person, and suddenly kaboom, it's all across the wall, there's multiples of it, then it's even bigger. I mean, that's fantastic.
There's a lot of power in that.
Yeah. The reclaiming is definitely the word, this is mine and it's still mine.
Yeah, it's still one of my favorite images. When I do see like that original cyanotype, I'm like, that's a really good cyanotype. Not to toot my own. And the image itself is one of my favorite images I've ever taken. Not only because of who it is, and I really love this cousin. She's basically, I don't have any sisters, so she's the closest I have to a sister. And also my cat. It was really, I'm, not that I can be glad that they did it to anything, but like, they chose a picture. I guess they didn't really choose it, I just left it by accident, but like, for it to be a picture that I can look back at now and still be proud of, it just means a lot to me. And to my family. I tell her all the time, I'm like, I'm gonna frame this for you, you better put it up somewhere, like, not this one, but like the original, yeah.
To what you were saying too, Lisa, about the size, I think just the fact that it was so small and so personal, that made it even, and so intimate, like that attack is deeper and so more personal, because I think about taking it into public art, right?
Yeah.
And the huge murals that we have throughout the city, and the fact that they get vandalized too,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
But when I have a mural that has been tagged, and on the one hand it's like, wow, you know what, that was really shitty, right? But it's not a personal attack, or I don't feel it as a personal attack. And so, yeah, just kind of juxtaposing those small, intimate pieces and the impact of that is working. Yeah, another question. You talked about the mirror in the central image, but the two on the other side, you put something else.
Oh, yes.
Is there meaning to the image that you put to the two sides?
I broke it, sorry. Yeah, so in the original ones, it's kind of just like, it was important to me to take out her face, and when I didn't put it in a frame and I just put it on the wall, it's easy for that to just be blank, especially when it's a neutral tone. I did, before I printed them out really big, I did play with the idea of what does this look like on a white background in a frame? How does that change this? And I really didn't like it. I thought it was not ugly, but it didn't add anything, and it wasn't neutral. It felt like it kind of took away from the piece. So I kind of just sat there and was thinking, it's like, what can I possibly fit behind her head to try to do something, And I work at a flower shop, and I'm surrounded by flowers all the time. So I think when I'm in the flower shop, we think a lot about kind of like farm fresh flowers versus the flowers that you get flown in, and we try to prioritize flowers from like the local area. And so at the time I was doing this, zinnias were like the big thing, and I was thinking of like, growth in this process, flowers, blooms, very cliche. It's not very like, but I was thinking of, ways to fill in her head with something that isn't her face or somebody else's face or a color, and thought a flower because of growth, like growing past this. And for her, if she ever saw this, I wanted to see something that kind of reminded me of her. I played a lot with a bunch of different flowers that reminded me of her, and this one was just kind of, one, the one that scanned the best, and two, I think just worked the best with the piece compositionally. Yeah.
I need to see the piece.
Yeah, it's in the gallery. It's right there. Yeah.
Thank you both.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you, Sam, for sharing this really powerful and courageous work with us.
Thank you guys for providing a space, I can't do any of this unless people show up, or else it's just me in a room, and I thank you for talking to me and, coming up with such great questions and providing, like your background as somebody who teaches in higher education, just bringing more depth to this conversation.
So I invite everyone to check out the piece in person in the gallery over here to the right, and we can continue the conversation there if you have any other thoughts or questions. Okay. Great.